And you wanted me to like kind of bring it up.
All right. I want to start off by thanking you all for coming to this week's Bear Ranch Foundation Seminar Series. We are fortunate to have with us this week Decky and Misti Spiller. They are coming up to us from Colorado, where they are managers at Silver Spur Ranch's Kiowa division. And I think this is a first for this seminar series. They do not have PowerPoint slides, but I'll let them with that take it away. And thank you all for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it. I hope this is not a waste of your time. Misty and I have been in production agriculture as husband and wife and co-workers for nearly 30 years now. And we're actually still married. We're not just here as co-workers. It's been the term lifetime learners came up in one of our discussions earlier today, and I like to think that's what we are. We try. I don't know if we learn. We ask a lot of questions. We might listen to the answer very thoroughly sometimes, but we try to do that. So, in what we're going to bring to you today is kind of an outline of where we've been and what our experiences have been in the beef cattle industry specifically. But you'll find that we have quite a diverse background beyond just beef cattle as we go through this. We'd like to kind of have our spouting off to you over with, where we can have some discussion and question and answer. So try to keep what we bring to you in the way of a presentation about 30 minutes, and then we kind of field questions and y'all can ask questions and we'll discuss. And if we run off on a tangent, that's fine. But my name is Decky Spiller. I was raised in West Texas, specifically between Sonora, Texas and Del Rio, Texas, on a research station owned and operated by Texas A&M University. The Sonora Research Station back then was primarily range animal nutrition, specifically Rambouillet sheep, Angora goats, and commercial cow-calf. There on the edge of the Edwards Plateau. It developed before I was gone into quite the prescribed burn research center, driven by Dr. Butch Taylor. But as a kid growing up, I took for granted a lot of things that later in life I began to realize I was quite privileged to be around them, and it set my mindset. I mean, we collected data ad nauseum on registered Rambouillet sheep as we catted them, lamb, sheared them, bred them, ran them on range, fed them out as weaned lambs, fiber research in both the mohair and the wool industry, lamb feeding and whatnot, and then range animal supplementation on beef cattle on range. And so my mindset was data, was recording of data, paying attention to the details, trying to find out, was there a better way to do it? And I just kind of assumed in the range management aspects of it and the rotational grazing systems that were tried out there and working. I got to work as a kid with Dr. Leo Merrill on some of the grazing stuff. So I didn't realize what it was labor when you're 8. But anyway, that kind of set the tone for where I have ended up, to be honest with you. And in most things, in retrospect, I wish I'd paid attention more and complained less, but I didn't. So having grown up there, I was aware of other universities, but I didn't really have a track to any other one. I went to Texas A&M University. I think it cost my parents some money in the way of scholarships because I did to some other places, but that's where I ended up. Misty and I probably should have known each other our whole life, but didn't meet until we got to A&M because I knew all of her father's family my whole life growing up, but never met her till we got to school. And spent quite a bit of time in Old Mexico doing some marketing of seed stock in and out of Old Mexico, lived down there and worked for a good while, and then came back and went to work for a brief time for the research center. Misty and I were married and going to work for extension, and things changed as far as extension in Texas was concerned. Spent about 5 years in a feed yard and stocker operation, and spent some time in land asset management for the state of Texas, and about 10 years in Texas Colorado and Nebraska we basically built from the ground up a seed stock Angus operation and ran it for about 10 years, worked for Ari Brown Ranch in Throckmorton, 2.5 years, I guess. Worked for Extension in Texas for about 2 years as an agricultural agent. And then we've been with Silver Spur Ranch for 12 years now in central Colorado. The division we manage there is their seed stock operation. So as we'll expand on later on, we are a integrated beef production enterprise with Silver Spur Ranches. We basically, from creation of the genetics that we think we want to engineer throughout the cow herd, and we get paid with hog harvest weight on the record as a major revenue source. So that's my experience and where I come from. I'm gonna let Misty tell you about her background.
Well, I was also raised in extension, in research. My father was the extension agent in Gillespie County where Brent grew up. He and I actually grew up together in 4-H, our siblings and all. We go back a long, long way. I get a lot of stories on that. Watermelon gum and all kinds of things going to stock shows. But my dad was agent there for 25, 30 years. He retired from extension. I grew up with extension specialists in our home all the time. So I think Decky and I both grew up with a background in research or an understanding of the importance of research, and then taking that research through extension and applying it to basically consumers, producers, helping those producers that come in the office with, hey, what's this bug that's eating my tomatoes? Or how do I be profitable in the beef cattle industry in the hill country of Texas? How can I put food on the table for my family? I mean, we've literally had people come in with those types of questions. And so that's part of how we grew up. My dad's family had been in ranching in registered sheep breeds, his growing up years, registered cattle. My mom's family raised hogs and grew peanuts. Kids, as we were growing up, it was not boys come on, let's go do. It was everybody come on, let's go do. Her brothers were all at Texas A&M, judged on livestock judging teams. By the time our oldest daughter got to A&M, she counted the competitive team pictures that included family members. There were over 30. So livestock evaluation, meats evaluation was always very important in our growing up years. And then we've taken that love of research and love of evaluation and applied that to what we do in our everyday life. Basically.
So Silver Spur, how many of you in the room are familiar with Silver Spur Ranches? A few of you. So Silver Spur Ranches has been in operation in its existing form for about 20 years now. But it got its start with some land acquisitions in northern Colorado and southern Wyoming. John and Leslie Malone had a desire to own some property, needed a place to park some cash, quite honestly, and wanted to invest in some assets that would accrue over time and not disappear. And then along that process, because John's mindset, it needed to go to work. It needed to be able to conserve the natural resources and maintain open spaces to keep them from being destroyed and developed. But it needed to work. He wasn't just going to own something and let it sit there. So there was management in place, and he retooled some of that management, and they began continue their commercial cow-calf operation, develop their hunting enterprises and their ability to use ecotourism for their pristine assets, and continue to acquire land all up until we're actually actively acquiring new properties as we speak. But more specifically and tailored toward where we are now. It grew and developed 20 years ago. The management was changed dramatically. Mr. Thad York took over as the general manager. He had a vision, and basically Thad's vision of where Silver Spur Ranches was going to go is where we are today and where we will move to in the future. He uses his team of managers on the different divisions to kind of drive that vision, and we kind of we all have a little piece of it because we all have to take care of a little piece of it. But as I said earlier, we are an integrated beef operation. We do not own a packing plant, nor do we have a label for our beef, and we will never be that. They had a piece of FBO, Future Beef Operations, years ago, but they kind of got in on the backside of unwinding it and kind of putting it to bed. And I think that probably gave them enough insight into that aspect of it that they don't want to play there anymore. And I'm glad they don't, to be honest with you. We create value-added products. We convert nature's forage and fruit forage into healthy and nutritious beef, and we sell that as hot carcass on the rail. And we do that through a number of value-added programs. Depends on kind of the economics of those and how those are driven, but we do it in our own feed yard with our own resources. And it's kind of scattered out. We're also diversified into quite a bit of acreage in irrigated potatoes, irrigated corn, both for grain and for silage, and then high moisture corn production. We utilize a lot of that on our own feeding operations, but we also market a lot of it. And as a lot of you will probably, if you don't know now, you'll learn later. Feed yard is a unique animal in the production cycle. It doesn't matter if it's sheep or cattle or what have you, it's very unique. There are a number of different revenue streams that can come into that, besides just the cattle coming in and going out. And there's critical mass you've got to maintain to make it economical run. And if you're tied to the cow-calf production operation, yearling stockers, as you feed that pipeline into that feed yard, you quickly learn that the feed yard dictates what everybody else does. And it took every education's expensive and it costs some money. Well, ours cost us some money when we bought a feed yard. We've been feeding cattle for years, but we didn't own the thing. So once we went to owning it, it took a little while for us to come to terms with it. And it dictated how the rest of the ranches work. We didn't just say, hey, here's these calves, you need to finish them for us to make them profitable. So that dynamic has led to some offshoots. But currently we maintain a cow herd annually between 16 and 18,000 mother cows in production. And you add in replacement females, bull batteries beyond that. Seasonal stocker cattle and yearlings number somewhere in the neighborhood of, probably 6,000 to 12,000 in the summer, grazing in Wyoming, northern Colorado, Nebraska, and central Colorado. New Mexico, we've kind of gone away from the stocker deal. It's just cow-calf down there. Although they do wean their and develop their own replacement females on the ranches in New Mexico. As far as locations, we're at the T.O. Ranch in Raton, New Mexico, Bell Ranch, Tucumcari, New Mexico, our division at Kyle, Colorado, Central Colorado, North Park, Colorado, around Walden, there's 4 divisions there. Saratoga and Campbell, Wyoming, there's 7 divisions there in that North Platte Valley. Then you go to Scotts Bluff, Nebraska, just east of there's Minutair. We've got a farm, irrigated grass, and a finishing feed yard and 2 grow yards there. Paxton, Nebraska, we've got a Sandhills grass, cow-calf operation and heifer development facility. Wallace, Nebraska, between Paxton and Wallace, there's a bunch of corn pivots. So we'll, depending on the market in the year, we'll harvest that grain or we'll green chop it. We custom graze a bunch of cows on those corn stalks, plus a number of our own in-house cows from Paxton and Wallace. And then south of Wallace, there's about 110 circles of corn and potatoes, mostly potatoes right now, which has been a new enterprise for us in the last 6 years, but it has been a very good diversification. Along with that, they've developed their recreation, ecotourism, recreation hunting opportunities along with that. We are charged with being a for-profit venture. We work for a guy that doesn't have to worry about where his next meal is coming from, but our part of that, we have to make our own money to make it run. So that's our deal. It's operate in the black or go away kind of a thing. one of the choke points for our beef cattle genetic selection is altitude. 75% of our cow herd runs above 6,000 feet. Pretty much all their life. So when you look at the availability of beef cattle genetics in North America and the gene pool in the Angus breed, Red Angus, Charolais, Hereford, what have you, we get to look at all of that and appreciate it and talk about people, and then we narrow it down to about 5% of that gene pool is what we get to play in, as far as known high altitude genetics. Now, we go out on a limb, we do our research, and we try to bring in outside genetics all the time because we don't want to read ourselves into a box. But that's what we get to play with, 5% of what the rest of them get to play with, if you're not facing altitude. In the last decade, it's become evident that there is something in the modern beef cattle genome that is affecting feedlot cattle that are lower than 5,000 feet, most of the time, no more than 2,500 feet, and it is causing right side heart failure or pulmonary hypertension in those fed cattle. And it looks just like an altitude disease, and it acts just like it, kills them just like it. But nobody knows why. And it began to get in enough folks' pocket that it's costing them money. Now there's some research dollars. So we've been involved with that research on the fed cattle side, because typically they don't die till the 30 days from harvest. So 100% of your equity minus the truck into the packer is tied up in that animal when he tips over. Couldn't be more expensive. So a lot of theories are out there, but just now beginning to initiate some research. Some of you in this room may have a piece of that research. I don't know. I know that it's kind of in its infancy, but there's enough people getting affected negatively that that's being driven. So that's kind of where Silver Spur Ranches is, what we look like. Our commercial cow herd is basically an Angus-based cow herd. Some of them are red, some of them are black. We're in Montana, and lightning may strike me, and that's okay. You're in the room with me. In our production scenario, Angus is Angus. We're much like everybody else in the world. Only in the U.S. do we have a Red Angus registry and a Black Angus registry. Everyone else has Angus cattle. They are either red or black.
Would make my life so
It-
much easier than
But
all.
for Silver Spur purposes, Angus is Angus, and that includes, for the most part, how we market our meat, hanging beef. Our programs are predicated on Angus. They don't care if they're red or black, it's Angus, 50% Angus or better. So our base cow herd commercially is Angus or Red Angus. I'd say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2/3 of it are black hided, third of it's red, and because I'm not a statistician, there's another portion of it that's yellow or gray. So if you add all that up, it's probably more than 100%, but at the division there in Kiowa, we produce about 250 bulls a year to go out and replace bulls in that bull battery that services those 16,000 to 18,000 cows. Misty's going to kind of go over how the genetics that we use came to be, and kind of specifically on those ranches, what their base cow herd is and how it came to be in lines there. But just understand that value-based production and then thus marketing in the beef cattle industry is driven by what you can meaningfully predict as far as your product performance is concerned. And so that's what drives how we design our genetic program at Silver Spur Ranches.
I think, like Decky said, that owning the feed yard, and for the length of time that Silver Spur has had the feed yard, has really made us focus more on what's going to make that feed yard. And at the same time, we have to have a running cow herd that can live and produce in the environment they're in. So our environments run from Tucumcari, New Mexico, and still at 5,000 feet, to Encampment, Wyoming, to Nebraska. So we're pretty diverse. The cow herd, we basically have 6 main divisions at Silver Spur. The cow herd at the Bell is a composite cow herd that was developed on that ranch for the Bell Ranch. It's Red Angus, Hereford, Gelbvieh, Red Brahman, Cross, composite cow herd. They call them the Red Bells. Since Silver Spur obtained the Bell Ranch, we've been running Red Angus bulls mainly there. We still have some black-hided animals that have to go down there due to top scores, and then we'll send some of our composite bulls. We have a composite that we call, so let me back up a step. In our registered division, we run Angus, Red Angus. We will make what we call black red carriers, because we don't care if they're Angus black, homozygous black, or red-hided, homozygous red-hided in Silver Spur. We have Charolais, we have a handful of Simmentals or Simmental crosses, and then we have this composite we call Rangefire, which is a Charolais Red Angus composite. So we'll send those bulls, and those Rangefires in our program are basically used as a terminal sire. We cannot produce enough Charolais. The Charolais don't hang around from a maternal standpoint. They don't like to milk. They don't like to get pregnant regularly. They are great as a terminal bull, and that is their highest and best use in my personal animal breeding opinion. But we use those Rangefires to fill in the holes in the terminal side of the sires. So we'll send some of those down south. The TO has historically been an Angus-based herd, black-hided. So a lot of our black-hided bulls go there. There's a little bit of Simmental, a little bit of limb flex influence in that cow herd. Wyoming is about 2/3 black-hided Angus base and about 1/3 red-hided Angus base. Again, there's some Simmental influence, some limb flex influence from back years ago. And the Silver Spur Ranch in encampment, where the operation gets its name, is one of the first Charolais breeders. Like one of the first 10 member codes in the Charolais breed. So that's where the Charolais influence comes at Silver Spur. Walden. Walden is kind of the Heinz 57 herd at Silver Spur. There's a little bit of everything in that operation. So we tend to send more of the terminal bulls to that location and do more of our replacement growing or development through those main cow herds in encampment.
Well,
in Walden.
As far as Walden's concerned in our operation, it's really primarily a yearling operation. We will have 20,000 head of yearlings up there. They'll become the yearlings and cattle that we take in on the gain. As far as using that resource, just not real feasible to try to winter a whole bunch of cows in North Park.
And Nebraska is mainly Angus-based, black-hided again. The registered operation, as I said, we've got black-hided Angus, red-hided Angus. We do the black red carriers. Our feel and where our mindset has been is that we can go out and get a much larger gene pool using black bulls on red cows within the Angus breed. So because we don't care what color the hide is, as long as they're Angus in our operation, we're going out and sourcing Angus bulls to improve the red Angus cow herd.
Well, give us a little more, a broader gene pool.
Broader diversity of genes, yeah. Decky talked about, we ranch mostly at altitude within Silver Spur. 28 years ago, we were pretty naive young Texas kids and got thrown into developing a registered herd of Black Angus cattle that was nationally recognized, but that was done in a portion on the western slope of Colorado. So we were running above 6,000 feet. We very quickly got an education in high altitude and very quickly got introduced to Dr. Tim Holt. And he has been a very close personal friend since that time frame. We work hand in hand with him constantly. Anytime we go source an outside bull, particularly in the Black Angus breed, we make a phone call to Tim Holm first. And we run pedigree by him before we make any major decisions. Interestingly, through our experience, you would think within that tiny gene pool of Red Angus that things would be much tighter, much more predictable within a small gene pool. We've found that it's just the opposite when it comes to high altitude. It is not as predictable. Tim has done enough research in the Black Angus breed. He could pretty well look at a pedigree and tell you, here's going to be the problem. This line right here. Watch for that. Don't stack that with X, Y, and Z lines. Within the Red Angus breed, we have not been able to find that.
Not with any
Predictable.
predictability. I think between Silver Spur and Larry Melhoff, we probably got as many adapted Red Angus cow lines as anybody, and I'm not going to guarantee you anything. If we're successful 50% of the time, we're winning.
We're happy. I handle all of our record keeping and all of our genomics. I do all of the analyzing of our data, trying to figure out where we're at. We pull in carcass data on, I'm not going to say 100% of what goes through that feed yard because things lose EIDs. But we get a large portion of our carcass data back. And as we've said, that data and that information is what drives what we do in that registered herd at Kiowa. What we've found, interestingly, is I don't know if Decky, remember if you told them, Silver Spur is an all natural program, GAP certified. We sold a large portion of the cattle 12 years ago, went to Whole Foods. That percentage has changed. All through ties, and that percentage has changed over the years somewhat, but due to the way we manage and feed cattle, we've found breed average works great for us. We don't need to be striving for the high end on carcass side because we still have to make that female work to come carry New Mexico or Walden, Colorado. So breed average and balance is what we strive for. So if they're good enough with growth, they're good enough on the carcass side, if they're good enough fertility, if they're good enough, that balance all the way through is what drives what we do, is we have to fit so many different. We have our own in-house index, a couple of them that we use. My background in evaluation and family ties. I have an uncle who did his research in sheep in New Mexico, and when he was there, he developed an index that was used to sort regulate rams. He then took that and applied it in his career, managing trust ranches all over the U.S., helped select bulls. So we've taken his index and played with it and kind of tweaked it to use in-house. It's very heavily weighted on gain, on scrotal circumference, and then we add in some carcass trait stuff. And we're pulling in now genomic information. So we're getting genomic indexes back from Neogen, and we apply that to this tool. It's not truly a true animal breeding index because there's no dollars involved in what we're putting into that formula, but it does give us, interestingly, a phenotype. So with that much weight in gain, we get big-footed, big-boned, big-middled, very gentle cattle, for the most part, that will come to the bunk and they eat. Every time there's feed put out, And we get a very masculine product on the male side. We've applied some of the genomic stuff, longevity, stability, heifer pregnancy through the genomic side of things and apply that to our replacement females. We haven't been doing that quite as long, so I don't know that we can see a trend there in terms of phenotype, but we definitely do on the bulls.
Along with that, longevity is a big deal for us. We kind of need, if the cow's going to work for us and fit our program, we need to keep them around a while. So that's a big deal. So the phenotypic traits that affect longevity would be soundness, feet and legs, udders, disposition, although I may be a little more forgiving on disposition than Misty is. But in general, they kind of need to be cattle that you can manage and handle. We have a mare band. We raise ranch horses. We do most of our livestock handling, rotations, gathering, branding, processing, using horses on our operation across all of them. Obviously, when it's appropriate and when we need to and it's efficient, we use four-wheelers and side-by-sides. We use pickup and caker and sirens. Our program is about being efficient, and we found that year in and year out, continuing to use horses and having folks that are skilled stockmen at handling livestock effectively, efficiently, and decently. Stockmanship is something we strive for, and the horses fit our deal. The Bell Ranch and the T.O. Ranch each are running right at 300,000 acres under one fence. It's pretty arid, pretty rough country. They cover lots of miles. They tear up lots of pickups if they're in the pickup all the time. So a lot of that stuff, when it comes to managing the livestock, is not horseback. In central Colorado, where we are, and this is where we'll touch on this a little bit. So we are truly, and we're really unique in Silver Spur, we are ranching in a modern urban interface. We are in about 5 different blocks on 100,000 acres in 3 different counties on the Front Range, Colorado. We have literally about 7,800 fence line neighbors. We only have 3 neighbors that are ranching. That's what the families that run those ranches do for a living. That's where Dale's wife's a school teacher, so that's probably where they actually make a living, but they ranch for a living. But there's only 3 of them that are still in production agriculture full time. Everybody else is a subdivision and a commuter, or they're retired, or they lease their country out to someone else who tries to run cows. But we're that corridor between Colorado Springs and Denver that's growing up. When you fly over it at night and land in DIA, the spots that don't have lights are us. There's some big chunks out there that are dark. Well, that's us. So that comes, not only do we run a seed stock herd there, so we're touching these cattle and gathering data, and we run it's not an intensive grazing, but we do run an intentional planned rotational grazing system in our part of the world. We have a bunch of country that's improved cool season forage. It's recovered old wheat fields and stuff and been replanted, and so it has a seasonal grazing. Then we have native shortgrass prairie, blue grama, warm season hard grass that we finish the season on, and then we've got meadows that we cut hay on, so grass and or grass alfalfa mixes. We have some small grain hay production, and we graze the residue there as well. We use that as when we'll fallow that country, we'll leave stubble for winter fallow, and then we'll plow that stubble back in. A lot of times we'll go back and reclaim those hay fields and leave residual organic material. But we have to manage our resources because it's limited. I mean, everybody else putting the house on. We're still running cows and raising elk and mule deer, and hunting is a large part of our revenue. But it comes with its unique challenges. I mean, we're ranching in town. The good part is, when your cattle get out, it's not very long. Somebody calls you, like right now. And like anything else, 98% of our neighbors are wonderful. They love living next to a piece of ground. They know that it's going to be open space, and they don't have to worry about someone building a house next to them. 2% of them take up most of my time because they're appeals. And they fuss and they complain, they cause problems and it's just, but only 2% of them. But it's like that in anything. I mean, you win a set of kids, 98% of them going to be fine, 2% of them going to take up all your time because they get sick and they tear down the fence and they run off. But we are in tune, more so than a lot of these guys, with, what are the trends in urban America? What does that look like? What's water going to be like? How, if everybody out there puts it in a well, I mean, the last 4 years in a row, I've had to drop equipment on alluvial wells because the water table's dropping. And we've been dry, but that's not the only reason. So maybe it's better if we're creating a Gen X and we're living next to the consumer, because we are. I mean, we're living right next to them. The guys in Mexico and the guys in Walden, they live next to consumers, but there's only 6 of them. Anyway, I think the term lifelong learner, I'm going to keep using that. I like that. And I'd heard it before, but it hadn't really clicked, because you have to be willing to grow and adapt. You have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and ask the hard questions and be prepared to get the answers you didn't want, if you're going to be successful and move forward. The nature of our integrated beef cattle production system is going to be different in 2 years than it is now. It'll be unrecognizable in 10 years, I'm sure, but we'll still be there. We'll still be doing it. But we got to be able to ask those questions and, stretch ourselves and become better and not take the blinders off. But there's a lot of truth to the phrase, the most dangerous phrase in the world is, why do you do that? Well, it's because that's the way we've always done it. And to some extent, I think that's true. I think you've got to be able to move forward. But as far as I know, the gestation period for a cow is still 280 days, more or less. I don't think that's changing. Now, this young lady right here may argue. But as far as I know, in a range cow scenario, that's still how that happens. You have to manage your production cycle around that. So there are things that work, that have always worked. There's other things that aren't going to ever work again. And you have to be astute enough and plan to get around and see what those new opportunities, you have to look at those opportunities. And that's what we try to do in the way we design our genetics, the way we feed our cattle, the way we run our rangeland, the way we manage our wildlife, all of that. Our interaction with the public, what have you, we have to be prepared to move forward and not get stagnant or back up. I've got lots of notes here. We could get into lots of stuff. I think, Misty, if you're good, let's are there questions? Is there some discussion? Because my experience in the past has always been, I'm going to get more out of your I'm going to learn more than you want. You're going to ask questions. You're going to make me think, and I'm going to get some insight that I didn't have. So I'd like to, if there's questions and comments, I'd like to open it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, how are you today? Chef Gary, and I teach culinary at Gallatin College there.
Yes, sir.
So this is probably going to be a pretty discussion here, but are you familiar with the Regional Food Business Center in Colorado? The Regional Food Business Center.
Regional food? I am not. No.
So Biden White House initiative to reduce diet-related diseases, create regional food business centers, which are helping farmers, and they high prioritize food entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So food entrepreneurs. So the was chefs moved to schools and that fiddled, and now you mentioned the water piece there. So do you think that and then you have the farmers, I mean, sorry to be Debbie Downer, but 48 farmers are committing suicide a day. Not many people are going into farming. Do you think that regional food business center, me as a food entrepreneur and a farmer and farm to school, should be more connected and more participatory rather than siloed in getting involved with the schools? The chef is the one who's going to take the beef and bring it to the school and demonstrate it. But we have a farm to school. We have like 8 farm to schools here in Montana, and it's difficult to get connected with that piece. So do you think we need to make that piece stronger?
So short answer is absolutely. Everybody, and this has been the trend, and it was accelerated through COVID. And I think unfortunately, for the next 100 years, there's going to be an asterisk next to the last 5 years. Well, it was COVID. It doesn't matter what you're going to talk about, whether it's how you lace your shoes, where your food came from, what your kid did in school, but that was COVID. But I think that trend was coming anyway. It's just, it was accelerated probably, I don't know how to quantify that, but probably at least 10 years because of that. Because people were isolated and wanted to know, where's my food going to come? That question's been asked a lot. But nobody was close to it until that happened. And they had time to think about it. So, like I said, short answer is absolutely. But I think, obviously, the trend is more transparency in the production of food in the U.S. And without a doubt, we have and will continue to have the safest source of food on the planet that has ever been. And it continues to be that way. Do we have foodborne illness? Absolutely. These mistakes happen. We're all human. They're going to continue to be that way. But by and large, if you want to live somewhere and not have to worry about where your food comes from, this country's where you go. As producers, however, we're bad at marketing. We're terrible. We don't tell our story well. In fact, a lot of times we don't even want to interact with the consumer because I don't want to have to go to the effort to come and speak with you and a group of chefs to a group of people who don't appreciate how I produce, this is my perception, how I produce my food. And I got hay baled and it's going to get rained on and I need to get hauled. So I'm not going to leave my place to come talk to you. That's how we go about our daily lives. Working hard. You ought to appreciate the food we produce. Don't ask me any questions. And if I talk to you, I'm going to be real condescending about, don't you know this is what it takes? Well, producer mindset, number one, tip number one, don't do that. That's, I can tell you. And I'm as guilty as anybody, but those producer mindsets have to change. I am not going to change the consumer mindset. I don't care how dumb I think he is, because they're not. They're very well educated. They've done their research. If it's on Google, that's fine. But they've done a set of research. They know what they want. They're willing to pay a premium for it if they feel comfortable with it, and there's a personal connection. So a farm to school program, I can't think of a better way to do that. You bring the producers in. So the mindset that I just described as to how I don't want to talk to you is the reason those guys end up in a corner. And the world's crashing down on them, and they end it, unfortunately. That trend is not unusual in the U.S. It's even more accentuated in the U.K. and in Europe, because those people are, a bunch of them now in the U.K. are having to learn how to do business without government supports. Brexit is probably going to be the best thing that happened to them, but that's 20 years down the road. You know, you look at the Soviet Union when they tore down the wall and said, capitalism is going to save all of you if you live long enough. Well, those guys and people in my industry are the same way. We kind of get closed-minded and, you know, everybody's against us. And, you know, everything we do is beyond our control pretty much. I mean, the weather, God controls all that, you know.
What you're talking about goes back to that lifelong learning.
Yes.
Again, we as farmers and ranchers in the food community have just as much to learn from the chefs and the consumers. And I think you're talking about that interaction is just vital.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just add one quick piece there. So you mentioned about the water table. So I recently was reading, and Montana has a lot of pulses. And I recently read that if we consume more pulses, now, no offense to Italians, rather than pasta, we're going to use less water. And then how many kids know how to cook brown rice 2.5-to-1 ratio at the stove, but only 1-to-1 ratio in an Instant Pot? So how many kids know that how to cook a pulse in an Instant Pot?
I didn't even know there was a difference. She can tell you I don't cook a lot either.
So anyway, I think that,
Yeah.
so we're still, I'm still fighting the silo issue of, you know.
Yes.
You know, and the regional food business centers is supposed to help us overcome those obstacles that I just met. So in your area too, that check into, you know.
Yeah, I
what
think
they
the
do.
only good thing that's come from social media is the fact that people can share those ideas. Everything else, as far as I'm concerned, is garbage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, sir.
So you said that you're running both red and black Angus and didn't have a concern about which was which in your operation. I was thinking, and Tim might tell me I'm misrepresenting this data here, but I was thinking about your coat color study and terms of then seeing that, the black Angus tends to do better in terms of thermoregulation, which, in cold stress situations are pretty important. And I'm thinking Colorado above 6,000 feet, cold stress is probably a constant challenge that your cattle are having to deal with.
Seasonally it is. So then you go the other side of it with the red-hided cattle, and there is a cultural understanding, I'll put it that way. I don't know that there's hard science behind it, but that may be trending, that the red-hided cattle go south of Colorado much better, handle those hot temperatures, maybe the subtropical temperatures better. Most of the data I get is observational. It depends on whether you're buying or selling too, as far as seed stock's concerned. As far as thermal regulation in cold climates, intuitively, I'd say, yeah, black-hided probably does better than something else. However, management, year-round management of the nutrition, body condition score, availability of shelter, mothering ability, your facility design probably has more impact directly on the viability of those cattle than their hide color alone. That's my opinion.
So you're not seeing anything observationally that would suggest that one's.
I think if we took our calving data across the ranch and looked at viability over a period of time, and this is not statistically sound at all, but it's what I've got on the top of my head right now. I don't know that you would see a difference between red and black as far as calf survivability across there. Now, most of that's probably going to be dictated by location, staffing, and facility design and nutritional levels. But I can tell you that Charolais cattle in general have more issues on snowpack due to the reflectivity and sunburn on their udders than black or red cattle.
And I think we could probably extrapolate out of ours.
We have some udder issues with Charolais cattle that come on earlier in that cow's life than they do some grass.
And I think some of the cold stress and baby calves,
Yeah,
we could probably attribute some to those.
as a
white
breed, most of those Charolais calves are kind of big and not very thrifty. The F1s and the composite cattle of the same color pattern will outwork them, either reds or the whites a lot of times. But in general terms, that's where I would see the color pattern in a given breed of cattle. I could probably pinpoint something, but between the reds and the blacks, I don't know that I can. I don't know that I can say that. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, you have a number of units, and very different. How's you have a feed? You try to time calving that fits specific environments, so you have cattle spread across the year.
So, yes, and we kind of skipped over that. So we are a spring calving operation exclusively as far as our owned cows. But that spring calving definition goes from January to nearly the 4th of July, based on regionality. New Mexico and our divisions are January, February, March calvers. They are because they're further south, they can push them earlier. We are because we're trying to make bulls have as many days of age in their first year of work as we can. So we're pushing. We're 60 days earlier calving than any of our neighbors there in central Colorado. The guys up in Worth, they're calving heifers 15th of March. Cow herd comes 30 days later. Nebraska's about that. So those late born calves every year, we have a grass cattle program. Some of you might have called it a value added program. We just call it late calves that didn't grow out very well. So those calves get sorted off at weaning. We'll run them through our backgrounding program. They get kicked out and winter pretty rough. And then we make a sort. Anything under 700 pounds goes back to grass in Walden and Wyoming. And that fills our first 2 quarters worth of kill in that feed yard. Bring them back as long yearlings. Our outside window's 30 months on our kill. So without a fall calving herd, that's how, and we have to buy cattle as well. We buy feeder cattle out of California, Nevada, and Utah to hit that kind of first 2 quarter kill. Yes, sir. That's the biggest challenge is having on I'm not gonna get off into the Packer conversation, but having Packer contracts is really a misnomer. It's contract for you, not for them. And if they decide to push it back or cancel it altogether, you're stuck with it. But you've got to kind of have laid out 12 months worth of kill, predictably with program ready capital. And so that's how we do that. Is those later calves get pushed to grass, come back as long term. Brent?
So Misty, you talked a little bit about the index, that you guys use on the bulls, where it's mostly a gain and some scroll circumference and genomics. No EBDs involved in that, it didn't sound like, or do you look at them at all? Or, and then on the female side, what are your selection criteria?
So Dr. Bob Weber, I've sat in on some of his seminars through King Ranch Institute. He likes the animal breeders, genetic folks like to talk about convenience traits. I laughed at him, but those are not convenience traits. Those are have to haves at our house. Feet and legs have to work and be sound. Udders have to work and be sound. Scrotals have to work and be sound. Those are the first things. So in Silver Spur, have to have proper PAP score. Have to live where we have to ranch. And then they have to have feet and legs that work. They have to have udders and scrotals that work so that we can get things bred first. And particularly in some of the breeds that we have to deal with, they have to be able to raise a calf and not starve it to death. Those are the most important things that we look at. In that index, it's growth, it's scrotal, it's some genomic things that we can't measure in that actual animal easily, like stability, pregnancy, longevity, gain. Gain's kind of one of those, I mean, there's RFI and there's all of those things that we're getting into further that genomic side of things can give us a little more of I think, a step forward past EPDs. I grew up judging. Brent and I grew up together judging from the time we were about that big. I went through Texas A&M, was on the meats judging team and the livestock judging team, and judged for Dr. John Edwards when he was at Texas A&M. He beat into our heads structural correctness, balance of traits.
And that would include an
An
EPD
EPD
profile with a
profile.
high,
Yeah.
and the accuracies involved.
Right. And so we went through, we worked for Ari Brown Ranch. Donald Brown is a firm believer in everything EPDs. We would get into the biggest arguments about the validity of our EPDs. And I probably go the opposite direction from Donald in that looking at the data as much as we do, you go to the Angus Association, go to the Red Angus Association, any of them, pick breed. How much have we truly changed birth weight? How much have we drastically changed weaning weights, yearling weights, by areas? Have we made a major drastic change in any of those traits or any of the traits we look at in the past 30 years
On average.
on average? We're going to look in-house because I don't trust the EPDs.
Again, lightning will strike us.
Yeah.
Here in just a minute. But so she said that, to be honest with you, and I'm not going to interpret what Misty's saying, we do use EPDs. EPD profiles now are genetically enhanced. So we actually, and this is a routine evaluation for us, we'll take known parentage genetics that were fed and killed, lay that data here. We'll take EPD data from siren down within our fed cattle, and then it will have known sires and a trend worth of sires in those commercial cows. Feedlot data there. So we'll lay that EPD data on those known sires, and we'll take the genomic data. So we use a suite of genomic profiles. There's a terminal, a maternal, and a composite that Neogen has commercially available. Then we have some that we custom designed for ourselves that basically tell us the same things, but we tweaked it for our operation. And we lay that down, and we routinely compare that data.
We're, again, it's all back to balance. We're not gonna just
So we're
go jump
looking
into one
At
piece.
friend data across those big chunks of data that came in different packages. And the EPD data is a trend evaluation from where we come from. And we avoid the extremes in any given trait. And we aspire to at least breed average, unless there happened to be something specific that we were chasing. Well, if we did that and we subjected ourselves to single trait selection, we would crash somewhere else really fast in the way we're having to manage things. So the EPDs are a tool in a big toolbox that we kind of have guardrails with. Across EPD evaluations for us actually probably are more meaningful if we can get baseline data that's accurate. A lot of times over time, we've kind of been able to see trends there. One of the things that we struggle with right now, and it came when they began to use genomics to enhance EPDs, was the wild change on the front end before things kind of settled in and established. And you still see that when you get a new update on a given breed with their EPDs, if they're genomically enhanced, there could be a wild change in there. It only comes right before you publish the cell catalog, evidently. But birth weight and calving ease. So in the last 20 years, most of Angus, Red Angus, either one, most of your calving ease, low birth weight bulls have shown to have been actually short gestation bulls. Because at term, they are probably not ideally for calving ease and low birth weight. And you can find out the hard way, or you can understand that's how it is. So now what we have found is the evaluation of EPDs and looking at high accuracy bulls for low birth weight calving ease is not bringing us to true calving ease and or low, they're two different things, and or low birth weight bulls. It's showing us the short gestation bulls, which is fine as long as everything calves 17 days early, which a lot of times they do. But the term calves are where we get into trouble. And it's not as acute with us in the seed stock deal because we're not calving out 200 heifers. But if we raise or we recommend an AI sire for commercial heifer project, and we stuff him in 1,500 heifers that are going to calve in 30 days, and they don't all calve early, then next year I get to go calve those guys' heifers for them because that is one of the things that we found. That and the milk EPDs are getting real hard to interpret in a real world. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of correlation. And milk EPD is an amorphous. I don't know what drives that. I mean, milk EPD is, I know what it's supposed to represent, but how they come about laying out that number and the accuracy for it is still, and I've been around this stuff all my life. And I understand how it's generated, but it's hard for me to track that kind of stuff. So there are certain ones that we might, but maintaining some guardrails using EPDs is useful.
Let's say we're running into the same thing in sheep world.
Yeah.
I mean, we're chasing numbers, we just made a big ewe that eats a lot more and I don't know.
And we really try to probably go overboard trying to avoid chasing fads and trends to the point where we might be chasing something because we're avoiding it, really.
When we're looking at matings and looking at all the things Decky's talking about, that I'll pull reports on the cow herd probably twice a year. And I go through and look at every single cow and her production record. And look at where did her progeny go? Did we keep them? Did they stay? Did they get fed? And look at a lot of the depth of the records on the cows. We use pretty significant database and we have a comments section. We use that probably more than we use the individual data. Kind of
Good set of cows, you can put almost any bull
a
Sometimes.
good uniform set of cows. And so that's kind of been where we've come from in the last 12 years, is trying to design and create a very uniform, very, I hesitate to say homogeneous genome in that set of cows. But if we're fairly uniform, we're fairly predictable in that genetic expression and the phenotype, then I can put any bull on them. And again, we're in Montana, a lot is going to strike me. I can pretty much fix a bad EBD in 1 AI mating. I can't fix a badly designed cow herd that fast. In fact, I can disrupt a well-designed cow herd pretty fast.
Really? Well, and hopefully at Kiowa, our end product is that 250 bulls we have to take to the rest of the ranches every year. And they have to go from period to bull then again, and so if we have a very tight phenotype type of bull that we send out, that wildly diverse commercial herd has to come back together somehow
Over time.
over time. So we're having to be really
And if you own them all until they hang up, right now.
what's
Now,
working.
the interesting thing is, in 20 years of carcass data, feedlot data, actually 27 years of feeding data at Silver Spur, we have been 98% choice or better, less than 10% yield grade 4s and 5s, straight across 7 years. Feeding
So
our own
that-
cattle, selling our
That
own.
average works for us.
Yeah, well, we're not trying to be complacent, but we know what has worked, and so we're trying to make sure, we're trying to identify more of them that'll live longer, to be honest with you.
Well, let's thank the Spillers for their time.